Hey there, Internet. It is Jason Dykstra here, and today we're talking about the one thing not to say to someone who is grieving. There are a lot of things that we can say to a person that can be harmful. The hard part about putting a list together of all the things not to say is that every person is different. Take platitudes, for example. You know those sayings like, for every door God closes, a window opens. Some people absolutely hate those. I remember when we lost my son, someone said this to me and it made me want to kick down the freaking door. But for others, sayings like this really gives them hope, and that's great. Honestly, what doesn't work for some people just may work for others. And while there are lots of things that we could say to people in their grief, there is one universal saying that should be absolutely eliminated from our vocabularies. Ready for it? At least. At least. At least he didn't suffer. At least the family had a chance to say goodbye. At least they had 50 plus years together. At least you have other children. At least. At least. At least. It's time we stricken that from our vocabularies because quite honestly, we use it all the time. Just the other day, I was driving to the grocery store and I came across this sign, chin up. At least the days are getting longer. So what's the problem with using the words at least to someone who is grieving? Let's first acknowledge that the person that's saying it, and I've also been that person, typically has the best of intention. We're trying to make it better for the person. So let's use this sign as an example. At least the days are getting longer. So what's this sign really trying to say? Well, there's a few things going on here. One is that grief or difficulties makes us uncomfortable. It's hard to acknowledge that people deal with real darkness, especially in the wintertime, because it makes us uncomfortable. And so we try to make it less awkward for us when someone else is having a hard time. I saw this sign in the middle of our lockdown here in Ontario. Thanks, COVID. And so what are people feeling during this time? It's winter. They're locked down. They're not going anywhere. Their kids are home. They don't see their friends or family in person, and they can't go to the mall to get some of that good old-fashioned retail therapy. And this sign is telling us to ignore all of those negative things. Sure, it's a good message, a message of hope, but is that hope so that we can feel more comfortable with the uncomfortable reality that people are struggling? When we use the phrase at least, that's typically what we're trying to do, make ourselves more comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. Sitting with another person's pain is hard. It's difficult. It brings up a lot of stuff for all of us. The second thing that sign is trying to do is make it better for the person that is reading it. It's a silver lining, bringing some light into the darkness. But here's the issue. Even though our intention is to make that person feel better, we typically make them feel worse. Let's put this back into a grieving situation. When we tell a person who is in the throes of grief, at least, we're trying to pull that person from the dark into the light, when what we're actually doing is robbing them of the very love they need and deserve in that moment. We think we're doing them a favor by highlighting all the good things that are happening around them, even in those dark moments, but really what we're doing is driving their grief underground and telling them to hide it, that it's not important, and that they should be focusing on all the positive things instead. So when we say, at least he didn't suffer, what the grieving person actually hears is you're being selfish thinking about your own loss, and you should be considering yourself fortunate that your loved one didn't have a difficult death. Or when we say, at least your family had the chance to say goodbye, what that grieving person actually hears is your pain is unimportant. You're being ungrateful for the opportunity that everyone doesn't get. Not everyone gets to have a meaningful goodbye, so you should count yourself grateful. When my wife and I lost our son, someone said to me, at least you have 2 other children. What I heard was, your grief is less worthy. Imagine if you didn't have any kids, then your grief would be valid. But since you already have 2 other children, you should be counting your blessings. So what can we do instead of saying at least? Let's start by recognizing that everyone's grief is different. Grief is a personal journey, and yes, we need to support and love others, but that grief is theirs and theirs alone. Our grief will look different, and that's okay. So let's show up for that person that's experiencing grief. Let's shut up and listen to the person that is grieving. Let's take our cues from them and follow their lead. And lastly, let's be present. Check your baggage at the door and be there. Clear distractions, turn your phones off, and just be. Well, that's it for me, folks. I really hope that you get something out of this video, and I would love to know how you show up for people in your life that are experiencing grief. Hop down in those comments and let me know. Until next time, folks,